A SwageLok is a grip-type mechanically attached fitting. The components of a SwageLok fitting consist of the SwageLok body, front ferrule, back ferrule, and the nut. The tools required to install a SwageLok fitting are open-end wrenches, smooth-jawed vice grips, depth marking tool, gap inspection gauge, and aluminum oxide, also known as plumber's roll. The gap inspection gauge should easily slip over the fitting body before the process begins. Use the proper size gap inspection gauge to verify proper installation. The tubing should be cleaned along the curvature of the pipe, not along the length. Cleaning the pipe along the length will leave longitudinal lines on the tubing, which could cause leaking. Ensure that the entire sealing zone is adequately cleaned. The sealing zone will be determined by the depth marking gauge. The tube shall be clean and deburred on the inside and outside of the tube ends. Surface flaws within the sealing zone can be blended to the surrounded area by sanding with grade 150 aluminum oxide cloth. Special note, any pits or longitudinal scratches that are deep enough to catch a thumbnail require further sanding. If surface flaws exist that cannot be blended with grade 150, use grade 80 to remove the flaws, then resand with grade 150. Ensure that the entire sealing zone is adequately cleaned. The sealing zone will be determined by the depth marking gauge. Place the tube inside the gauge until it has bottomed inside the gauge. Mark around the OD of the tubing with a pen, pencil, or other adequate marking device. Rotate the tube inside the depth marking gauge to verify that the tube end has been cut square and within tolerance, plus or minus 5 degrees. Place the fitting on the tube until the tube has bottomed inside the fitting body. Do not force the fitting onto the tube end. Forcing the fitting onto the tube end may damage the ferrules. Inspect the mark on the tube prior to tightening. If the mark on the tube can be seen above the fitting, the tube has not fully bottomed inside the fitting. Place a scribe mark on the nut and tube. While holding the fitting body steady with a backup wrench, tighten the nut 1 1/4 turns from the original position. After tightening, visually inspect the fitting to make sure the depth mark is visible. Use the proper size gap inspection gauge to verify proper installation. Insert the gauge between the nut and the body of the fitting. If the gap inspection gauge does not fit in the gap between the nut and the body, the fitting nut has been sufficiently tightened. If disassembly is required, the fitting may be reused, provided 1 1/2 turns are applied when tightening.